The courtroom was packed, journalists on the stairs, officers standing like statues, and a trembling woman in a faded gray hoodie standing alone before the judge. People whispered, "Coward, disgrace, why is she even fighting the charges?" The judge leaned forward, voice booming through the speakers. "You abandoned your duty. You walked away when others stood their ground. That makes you a coward." The room erupted in murmurs. The woman lowered her eyes, hands shaking, until she slowly lifted her head and stepped closer. Her lips barely moved, but the moment she whispered a single call sign, the entire court fell silent. A colonel gasped. A general stood up so fast his chair toppled. And the judge went pale. Because the call sign she spoke was one known only to a small, classified group, heroes whose missions never made the news, and whose sacrifices shaped the nation. The truth was finally about to be revealed, piece by painful piece. The morning sunlight filtered through the high windows of the federal courtroom, casting long golden stripes across the polished floor. People filled every bench, many out of curiosity, others out of confusion. The woman standing at the defense table didn't look like someone who had served in the most dangerous units of the military. She looked tired, worn, haunted. Her name was Alina Ward, but today, everyone called her something else, the soldier who ran. The prosecution painted her as someone who abandoned her unit during a critical mission overseas. Every newspaper splashed her face next to bold letters, "Coward," "Traitor," "Deserted her team." She stood alone, no family present, no friends, just her anxious attorney flipping through pages that could never capture the truth. Judge Harrison, stern and feared across the state, slammed his gavel. "Miss Ward," he said, his voice like stone scraping steel, "the charges against you are serious. You were entrusted with lives, with duty, with honor, and yet you fled. Do you dispute this?" Alina didn't answer. She simply lowered her head, gripping the edges of the wooden table until her knuckles turned white. The crowd murmured again, her silence was all the fuel they needed. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Her teammates risked everything. She, however, abandoned her post. The nation deserves justice." The judge nodded, his jaw tightening. "Miss Ward, unless you can provide a reason, any reason at all, this court will consider this a grave act of cowardice." Cowardice. The word dug into her like a blade. For months she had carried the weight of guilt, suffering alone with memories she couldn't share, not without breaking laws of secrecy, not without betraying promises she swore would never be spoken. But now the truth threatened to burst out of her. She inhaled shakily, her voice cracking. "I didn't run," she whispered, but it was too soft, too fragile. No one heard. And the judge, losing patience, leaned forward. "Then explain yourself." Alina closed her eyes. She knew that once she spoke, nothing would be the same, not for her, not for the people in that courtroom. She took a deep breath. And for the first time, a spark of steel flickered in her eyes. Hours earlier, Alina had sat alone in a small holding room behind the courtroom, tiny, cold, and suffocating. She had run her fingertips over the scars on her wrists, each one a reminder of the day everything went wrong. The mission. The screams. The fire. The choice no soldier should ever have to make. Her mind drifted back to the beginning, before the accusations, before the war. She had been a young recruit with no family and nothing to lose, eager to prove she was worth something. Her determination had caught the eye of a quietly influential commander who placed her in a classified unit known by only a handful of officials. A unit with no name, only call signs. Alina proved herself quickly, smart, fearless, steady under pressure. She earned a call sign most soldiers only whispered about. A call sign tied to missions that never reached the public. Missions where failure meant hundreds of lives lost and success meant silence. She was proud once. Until the mission in cost. Her team had been ambushed in a valley at night, no moon, no backup. She remembered the explosion, the deafening blast, the way dust filled her lungs. She remembered crawling through burning debris to reach her teammates. Some were injured beyond recognition. Others. She shook her head, trying to stop the memory, but it clawed at her anyway. The reason she had been accused of running was simple: she had been the last one standing. The only survivor. And in the chaos, she had dragged 2 badly injured soldiers for miles, searching for extraction, losing all communication. When she finally signaled for help, she was found miles away from the original site, alive, but broken. But the world didn't want to hear that story. It was easier to label her a deserter than to believe she survived something impossible. In the holding room, Alina clenched her fists. She wasn't afraid of the judge. She wasn't afraid of prison. She was afraid of the truth, because speaking it meant revealing a call sign that was supposed to die with her. But as the voices in the courtroom echoed in her memory, coward, liar, traitor, a painful realization came over her. If she didn't speak today, the story of what really happened would be buried forever, along with the honor of the teammates she had loved like family. So when the guard escorted her into the courtroom, she stood as tall as she could, even though her heart felt like it was shattering. And when the judge called her a coward, something inside her finally broke. She decided she would whisper the truth, no matter the consequences. If you wanted something else, tell me anytime. The courtroom buzzed with impatience, shuffling feet, rustling papers, deep irritated sighs. Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses, clearly moments away from delivering a harsh verdict. Alina's attorney nudged her, whispering urgently, "Please say something, anything." But words had never felt heavier. Alina looked up at the judge, the man who represented the system she had protected with her own blood. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out the whispers around her. She inhaled slowly, the tremble in her hands fading as the soldier she used to be slowly resurfaced. Then she stepped forward. The bailiff tensed. The audience leaned in. Alina didn't speak loudly. She didn't have to. She simply whispered 2 syllables, a call sign that had been buried in secret files, known only to those who survived missions that no one else ever heard of. Spectre, 7. The effect was instant. A decorated colonel sitting in the second row went rigid, his eyes widening as if he'd seen a ghost. A woman in uniform dropped her pen. A general at the back stood so suddenly that his chair slammed against the wall with a sharp crash. Judge Harrison froze mid-breath. His eyes widened behind his glasses, and for a moment, he looked like he had forgotten how to speak. Because Spectre, 7 wasn't just a call sign. It was a legend. A phantom unit. A group that handled the darkest, most covert missions, missions that required an unnatural level of courage, and an acceptance that you might never return. The judge's lips parted. You can't be. Alina lifted her chin. I am. Silence crushed the room. People who had mocked her now stared like they were witnessing something unreal. Even the prosecutor stepped back, his face draining of confidence. He knew now, he wasn't prosecuting a deserter. He was prosecuting someone whose entire existence had been locked behind classified walls. Judge Harrison swallowed hard. This court was not informed of your involvement in. He stopped himself, realizing he legally couldn't utter the words. Alina's voice broke the silence again, quiet but unwavering. My unit didn't run from anything. We ran into hell so others didn't have to. A ripple of emotion swept the courtroom. But the mission in cost, the prosecutor stammered, the report shows. The report shows what it was allowed to show, Alina replied. But it doesn't show what I saw. What I survived. What I carried. Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. It doesn't show the people I lost. For the first time since the trial began, the public realized they were not witnessing the trial of a coward. They were witnessing the unraveling of a truth too big for headlines. A tremor passed through Alina as she finally let the memory surface, the one she had buried for years because remembering hurt more than the scars on her body. She closed her eyes and spoke. Coast wasn't supposed to be a combat zone that night. We were there for extraction. A rescue. 3 hostages. Simple window. Clean exit. That was the plan. But plans rarely survived reality. We landed at 0200 hours. The valley was quiet. Too quiet. Our tech guy, Briggs, kept saying something felt off. We laughed at him. Her lips trembled into a sad smile. It was the last time any of us laughed. She swallowed, her voice growing steadier as she continued. When we reached the safe house, it wasn't our people waiting inside. She paused, breathing deeply. It was a trap. Explosives rigged everywhere. The whole place blew. A collective gasp spread through the courtroom. I was thrown into a wall so hard I couldn't see for a few seconds. When my hearing came back, all I could hear were screams. Alina pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the phantom heat of the explosion. My team was down, scattered, burning. Tears pricked her eyes, but she kept going. I pulled Commander Hale out of the fire. His leg was gone. He told me to leave him. Her voice broke for the first time. I refused. I got him on my shoulder and started dragging. She steadied herself with a shaking breath. Briggs was still alive, but bleeding out. I had to make a choice. Carry one. Or carry both and lose them. Her voice dropped, a whisper filled with pain. So I carried both. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. I walked for miles in the dark, dodging enemy patrols, holding pressure on their wounds, slipping in and out of consciousness. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't let them die alone. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Hale died at dawn. Briggs lasted an hour longer. A hush fell over the audience, no judgment now, only heartbreak. I wasn't running from the mission, she whispered. I was running with what was left of my team. Alina looked up, meeting the judge's eyes squarely. When the rescue squad found me miles away from the blast site, I wasn't escaping. I was trying to save lives with the last strength I had. Judge Harrison's grip tightened on his gavel. His stern mask was cracking. You misunderstood my distance, Alina said quietly. You called it desertion. Her voice hardened. But that distance was the weight of my brothers. The courtroom could no longer look at her with the same eyes. Because now they knew. She didn't run. She fought until she had nothing left. When Alina finished speaking, the courtroom felt hollow, like the wind had been knocked out of every person sitting there. Even the air seemed to change, thick with an ache no one could ignore. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, his fingers trembling slightly as he removed his glasses. He had seen hundreds of cases, thousands of testimonies, but never had he been confronted with a truth so heavy it bent the room around it. Alina's attorney sank into his seat, stunned. The prosecutor stared down at his notes, suddenly looking like a child who had been caught trying to play a game he did not understand. Every line he had prepared, every accusation, now felt cruel and shallow. The judge finally spoke, his voice strained. Miss Ward, why didn't you present this information earlier? Why did you allow yourself to be branded this way? Her eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. Because my unit operated in the shadows. Our missions were classified to protect lives, even after death. I wasn't allowed to speak. And I wouldn't dishonor my team by revealing their work just to save myself. The judge rubbed his forehead, guilt tightening his jaw. But you were facing prison. I know, she said quietly. But prison is nothing compared to the silence my team lives in forever. A deep ache rippled across the room. No one dared move. Across the benches, the colonel from earlier stood up. He cleared his throat, voice thick with respect. Your Honor, with permission. I can confirm the existence of Spectre 7. A shockwave passed through the crowd. The judge gestured for him to continue. That unit completed 14 missions deemed impossible. They saved thousands of civilians. They prevented attacks that would have shaken this nation to its core. And Miss Ward, he said, turning to her, was the youngest operative ever to earn command-level clearance. Murmurs rose again, this time filled with awe, not judgment. The prosecutor swallowed, suddenly aware his case had crumbled into dust. Your Honor, he said quietly, given this new information, the state withdraws its charges. The judge nodded, but his expression remained troubled, not with anger, but with remorse. Alina stood silently, her heartbeat steady for the first time in months. But the judge's next words were unexpected, soft, raw, human. Miss Ward. I owed you respect from the beginning. Instead, I judged you without understanding your truth. His voice wavered slightly. You are no coward. A tear slipped down Alina's cheek, surprising even her. I never asked to be seen as a hero, she whispered. I just didn't want to be remembered as a disgrace. The judge shook his head. You will be remembered as someone who carried more than any soldier should. And today, this court owes you an apology. The crowd erupted, not with applause, but with something deeper, a collective exhale of guilt and admiration. People stood, one by one, heads bowed in respect. For the first time since the nightmare began, Alina felt seen. But her story wasn't over. There was still one more truth she had to face, alone. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, microphones flashing like lightning, but Alina walked past them without slowing. She didn't need interviews. She didn't need attention. She only needed peace. A quiet breeze brushed her hair as she walked away toward the parking lot, where her old mentor, the same commander who recruited her years ago, waited leaning against a car. General Rourke. Gray-haired. Stern. But his eyes softened when he saw her. You did what you had to do, he said. Alina swallowed. I broke protocol. You upheld a legacy, he corrected. Those boys deserved their truth. He handed her a small, weathered envelope. Alina frowned. What is this? A letter Briggs wrote weeks before cost. We only found it during the cleanup of classified archives. He asked us to give it to you, if something ever happened. Her breath hitched. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a simple handwritten note. If you're reading this, it means we didn't make it. Alina, you always carried us, on missions, in training, in life. If one day they call you a coward, remember this. You were the bravest of us. And if you have to walk alone, walk proud. Briggs. A sob escaped her lips, quiet but unstoppable. Rourke placed a steady hand on her shoulder. You saved their memories today, he said. That's more than most ever get to do. Alina wiped her tears, straightened her posture, and looked at the horizon glowing with sunset. I didn't save them, she whispered. They saved me. Every day forward is their gift. Rourke smiled. So what now? Alina took a deep breath, her voice clearer, stronger. Now I live for them, not in silence, but in honor. I won't hide anymore. As she walked away, the golden light caught her figure, not the outline of a broken soldier, but the silhouette of someone rising from the weight of her past. The world had called her a coward. Today, it learned her truth. And tomorrow, she would rebuild her life, not as Spectre 7, but as Alina Ward, the woman who carried her team until her legs gave out. And kept walking anyway. A reminder to anyone watching. Sometimes the strongest heroes are the ones who survive. And survival is never cowardice.